Guys, it's astounding as we talk about the things you're accomplishing in 2010, 2011. It's not a whole lot different than what you were doing back in 1974. You're solving problems to keep the business going. Just that the problems are much greater scale in 2010, 2011. You're still, like you said, you have to just wrestle these things down. And it's kind of it's what you've always done. But there's a change in 2011 where you brought a certain guy on board named Andy Powers. And it's kind of like the first gesture towards succession planning. And maybe you weren't thinking of it in those terms, or maybe you were. But I know it's something that you've talked about and how Andy came on board. But could you share with us, Bob and Kurt, just your perspectives? How did that all happen? What was the thinking behind bringing Andy on board? Did it free you up to do new things, new pursuits to keep the company moving forward?
I wasn't thinking of it in terms of freeing me up. I was thinking of in terms of the longevity of the company and us having a guitar maker with a seat at the table is the way I expressed it and thought about it at that time. I didn't really think about it as being the helm of the company, which Andy turned out to be, in the long run. But the work that I was doing on that started several years before that, because Larry Breedlove and I designed our guitars. And as a matter of fact, Dave Hostler went during his tenure. He's the one who designed the T5 and designed the pickups that go in our guitars now. And so I had some people that helped me design, but I had looked at larger companies that have had several successions, and you can't name the guitar maker. And I'm friends with larger companies, and there's so much like committee work, or maybe the guitars that they're designing is being designed by marketing department or sales. I do know that when Michael Dresner worked at Martin, he designed their Rhodes Series guitars and their A-frame bracing and that type of thing. He was a good designer. But I always felt like Taylor had an advantage because when you got to, I'll say, the executive team or the boardroom, so to speak, what most people would think about that, there's somebody who's a boss of a bunch of stuff. Namely, that would be me, right? Who's all about the guitars. There's a boss of marketing and sales, and finance, that's Kurt. But there wasn't a conglomerate of people that are like, well, we're going to make some guitars. Let's talk to marketing, see what they need. There needs to be someone who says, here's how we're going to make guitars. Here's what the factory's going to look like. Here's the money we need to do it. Here's the future of it. Here's the wood we're going to use. I've never, ever experienced that problem at Taylor Guitars. But I do know a lot of people that experience that problem working in other factories. Well, we could make the change, but I don't have any say. And so I began worrying about who's going to be that person. I already knew that person didn't exist at Taylor Guitars because the person that I needed was, has to be self-taught. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But I went into Larry's office one day and I said, hey, Larry, how long are you going to work before you retire? And he says, 5 years. I've already got a place bought up on San Juan Island. It's where we're going to move. And I go, okay, I got 5 years, to find somebody to replace you, because I could do it alone, but then that would be all that I'm doing. Larry and I together could do it, and we could work on it together. But I could go off and do some other things and come back, and he would have made progress on it, and I could trust him. I could trust him to draw curves I would like, to put designs together that I'd like, and then we could talk about the mechanics of the guitar together and get together with our R&D team. So I knew that person didn't exist at Taylor, because the people that I hired at Taylor worked in a department for a company that already existed. Even if they turned into a VP of, production, they never made guitars start to finish by themselves, handed it to a customer, took money, then got a phone call saying, this isn't working. I need to come back in, and I got a gig on Sunday, and your Saturday needs to be mine because we need to solve. I did that. They weren't responsible for making that guitar be profitable or sellable or anything. So how could they be that person to replace me, right? How could they be that person? That person would have to have gone through that experience themselves, read the books themselves, looked at old guitars themselves, learned how to use a chisel on a bench themselves, learned how to design something that they thought made sense themselves, and then defend it themselves, and then sell it themselves, and then service it themselves. And when it goes wrong, it hurts their wallet, and they have to toss and turn at night. That doesn't exist in a company with people who work for the company. The things that go on, the company bears the brunt of it, but not the person, right? And so when it comes to guitar design, I needed that person. Also, that person needed to be elevated to where one day when you're sitting around and there's 8 people around a table, all with their point of view, whether it's personnel, legal, marketing, sales, finance, whatever, that person has more than an equal voice when it comes to what we're going to build and how we're going to build it, right? They've got to be in tune enough to where people defer to them. Oh, well, if you think that we should use ebony with color on it, we will. Rather than, I don't think I can sell that in marketing. Oh, gee, I got some comments on our website last night and someone didn't like it, so let's quit doing it. Or legal deciding where you can buy wood and where you can't, or you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You've got to have someone who can be the wellspring. And so I just knew that inside, that's what had to happen. But who's the person? And I do tell this story because it's a true story. I've told it so many times, I'm getting tired of telling it myself. But it's a true story, and it's worth telling. And I just sat down and took a piece of legal, and I wrote, Dear God, I need one guitar maker. Who? And I wrote these lists of attributes. And this was after I talked with Larry, maybe in the first year of him saying, I'm going to retire in 5 years. Who is a good person who can make a lifelong commitment, who is self-taught, has never worked for a guitar factory, knows all how to build guitars by themselves, their own ideas about it, who is a pro player. Because at this point in time, a pro player is going to be able to make that, our company could make the transition away from what Bob Taylor thinks to what another person could think, not only based on their good guitars, but the fact that they would know that guy can play. Now, I can't really play very well, but over 40 years, I'd become Bob Taylor, you know what I mean? So if I wanted to go meet an artist, well, yeah, I want to meet Bob Taylor, but who's this new young whippersnapper that I have to meet? I heard him play. Oh, yeah, okay, I want to meet that guy. You know what I mean? So these attributes went on. Who knows the deep history of guitars, which is something I never knew, but I wish I did, and it's going to be really good for us in the future to have someone that's well-versed in that. You'll laugh about this, but I wrote it. Who has 20 years of experience and is less than 30 years old, and who lives in San Diego, right?
Oh, is that all?
That's all.
Did they have to be a surfer?
Pardon me?
Did they have to be a surfer?
He did not have to be a surfer.
Okay.
But San Diego culture is different. And when I've talked with a few people in the industry who said, I don't get that part at all. It's like, well, I get it. I can explain it to you. You still might not get it, but East Coast culture is different than our culture. We think about design differently. We think about our guitars differently. We think about innovation differently. We're not, we know about what was done before, but we're free to make changes. Well, it just seems if they were a good guitar builder, that's all you'd need. Well, I'll say is I get it. I get why they need to be from here. And I just, filed that away in my mind, and it went in my desk and finally went its way to trash. And then one day, and I always sort of feel like if you can just be patient, a lot of the things you need, they'll come to you. But on something like this, and a lot of things, on something like this, I don't believe in a name it and claim it kind of a, you made the world happen because you have this idea that you wrote down. But I do believe that you might not even know what you're looking at if you're looking straight at the person if you hadn't defined what you want. They could come and go, and you're like, there went my chance, and I didn't even see it, because I just have this vague idea, but I wouldn't know how to recognize it. So we were at a NAMM show, and Jason Mraz was playing for us, and he was back in the little green room we had, and I went in to say hi to him, and he had this guy playing, and hey, have you met my friend Andy Powers playing for me tonight? Oh, Andy, nice to meet you. Andy's dad was there, and he said, well, Andy met you. We sat behind you at a Harvey Reid concert when he was 17 years old or so. He brought a ukulele, and we tapped on your shoulder. It was at Maricosta College, and he asked you questions about building stuff. And you were nice, and you answered them. And I go, I remember you guys. I'll never forget you guys. I totally remember that. And I go, Andy Powers, you guys, and he's like, yeah, we live in Oceanside. I go, yeah, you're the guy that Kevin Kinnear, who was one of our sales guys at one of our dealers, has been talking about what awesome archtops you make. You're him. And he goes, yeah. I go, okay, I get it. You're the guy that was 17 years old, and you're the guy that Kevin raves about. Yeah, I like to build guitars, and he's always understated. And I go, cool. And that was that. I went home and I thought, oh, Andy Powers, what a cool guy. He's in his late 20s, married, making guitars on his own. And I'm friends with Pepe Romero Jr. He'd been coming around a lot. We help him run some wood through our sander. Maybe we sold him some wood. This is the son of Pepe Romero, the great classical guitar player, the Romero brothers. And they're a Del Mar family, San Diegan. And Pepe has become a good guitar maker. And his dad has gone around and promoted his classical guitars and flamenco guitars that he makes. And he's a real nice guy, Andy's age. And I just thought one day, I got to get those two guys together. I want to make friends of those two guys, because my best friends in the world have been like Bill Collings and Richard Hoover and John Larrabee. And, I could go down the list, and Roger Sadowski and Michael Gurry and all these guitar maker friends of mine that I share with, that we see each other, that I'm buddies with. They've been really close friends. And I don't think Andy and Pepe know each other, but they probably surf the same wave in, Encinitas or Oceanside in the mornings. And they're both newly married, and they're both 28 years old, and they both have new kids, and, they're both guitar makers. You'd think they could be buddies. And so I called them individually and said, hey, I want to put you two guys together, and I have this weekend place on the beach up in Sauna Beach, and I'm proposing that we get together for like a hangout day. And the only rule is we all three have to bring a guitar that we've made, which is going to be hard for me because I've been making guitars in a factory for a long, long time. But I do have a guitar or two that I made myself, all by myself, from start to finish. And I still can do that today. But I started having help helping me make guitars. And so I didn't just bring a Taylor guitar. I brought a guitar I made. We did that. We met. We hung out all day long. We had a really great time. And at the end of the day, I said, well, I'm here to help you guys. I thought maybe you could be friends, but if there's anything I can do to help your guys' career, can you help you with machines? Is there some things you want? Is there some wood supply? Whatever you want, I'm happy to help, right? You could feel free to count me as a friend and come on in. And that's all I wanted for the day. But during that time, we looked at the guitars that we'd made, and then I went home and I looked at andypowersinstruments.com, and I started looking at the work that he'd done and who he'd done it for. And Andy's not much of a name dropper. When he sits around and go, well, I have a friend who plays guitar and he's a really good singer. And when we get together, and that friend would be Jason Mraz, or you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So Andy's, even at that time, Andy's celebrity guitar player roster was pretty big, even though he hadn't made that many guitars compared to us. He made a dozen guitars a year, and his guitars were incredible. And he made ukuleles, he made electric guitars, solid body guitars, archtop guitars, acoustic guitars, classic guitars, mandolins, he did it all. And it was just a day. And then about 2 weeks later, I was driving to work, and I was sitting at a stoplight, and I'm like, wait a minute. And I just thought of that list that I had, and it was like, check, 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 And he made his first guitar when he was 7. He was 28 years old when I met him, so it even checked off the 20 years of experience and less than 30 years old. Mm-hmm. He's from San Diego, the right kind of person, all of this. And so I called Andy and I said, hey, there's something I want to show you, maybe talk to you about. Could you come down for lunch one day? And he did. And to me, it was kind of awkward, probably to him too, because I'm going to pop this question, because he had a groovy thing going on, So we went to lunch, and we eating our sandwiches at a restaurant, doing a thing. And I go, hey, Andy, can you name the guitar maker at... And he's like, yes, no, 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 no. Well, yes, no, no, no. I go, well, I don't want Taylor to be a company that somebody can't name the guitar maker. And my life isn't infinite. It's not going to go on forever. And I'd like people to be able to say, who's the guitar maker at Taylor Guitars? We need to transition away from Bob Taylor or Bob Taylor and Larry Breedlove. I don't mind if those come in the same sentence. And I don't even care when people said, well, Larry Breedlove does a lot of their designs. I wanted them to be able to name that person. Mm. And again, I wanted that person to have some pull and sway in the direction of the company. And I said, can you name that? And no. Well, we went through the examples. And I go, well, I don't want Taylor to be a company that doesn't have a guitar maker that can be named, a wellspring of where our stuff comes from. And I'm not in the business of telling you what you were born for, but maybe this is what you're made for. And I said, so go home and think about it. And he did. And we had a few philosophical discussions. And once he called and said, well, what about other people that live there? Will they feel usurped? Will they feel like, they should have gotten that position? I go, no, they already know they're not that person. They already know that. Inside, what I felt was, this is my decision to make. I get one chance to make it. It's nobody else's decision. It's not a group decision. I'm the one who has to know that I know that I know, mm-hmm. right? That's my responsibility. It's my heavy weight. I don't get 2 cracks at it. I get 1 crack at it. So I'm not going to present it like a bully, but I am going to very easily and comfortably say, this is the guy who's coming to do this, and this is my choice, right? And so Andy talked about it a little bit more. He asked a few questions, and he wanted to come out and meet some people. He was a little bit timid about whether he'd be accepted or challenged or stifled or whatever. And then he got comfortable with that. And then one day he said, I got a pretty comfortable life going here. He didn't own a cell phone. He's like, what do I own a cell phone for? I'm in the garage. My wife knows where I am, and I play music. He plays on TV shows and in studios. He was playing music half-time, building half-time, making good money. He took a pay cut to come to work for us. I said, well, Andy, look at it this way. You have a talent, and you're going to spend it over the course of your life. At the end of it, you're going to have used that. You're going to have spent it, invested it, and drained it, And right now, you make about 12 people a year happy with the guitars that you make. You're improving a dozen people's guitar playing experience with what you're doing. But if you came here, you could improve the experience of people's guitar playing for a couple 100,000 people a year, and you could do some things maybe beyond yourself, like a couple of little accomplishments I've had along the way, where you could change the state of the art of guitars a little bit, right? Maybe even a lot. A little tangent. Yesterday, I was looking at I got an email from Stu Mack and looking at guitar kits. And you can buy these guitar kits, and you can choose from the Dovetail guitar kit, acoustic guitar kit, or the bolt-on guitar kit. Now, who would have thought that when I bolted on a neck and got flack for it 50 years ago, that one day you would have changed the state of the art of the way guitars are made enough to where those are the two choices that you can subscribe to one or the other, right? In a guitar kit that you can buy from Stu Mack. Andy has this, so when I say a few accomplishments I've had, there's a couple like that, right? I'll never say I made the best guitar in the world. Anyways, that hit home with Andy. He's like, yeah, wow, okay, that's a little higher calling than just me living my life. That's the most comfortable life I can live. He didn't need income, and he didn't need status, and he wasn't clawing to come to work at Taylor Guitars. Oh, this has been my dream to work for you. He was a very confident guitar builder with a very good life. So I talked with people at work and said, this is going to be the hire. And Andy came, and we started right in, and he started working on stuff. He got his feet wet. Once every 2 months, he would ask me how he's doing. Is it working out? He doesn't ask me how he's doing anymore, But the wonderful, wonderful thing about it is, to compress the story, and then I'll let Kurt talk about Andy, was that I remember, Kurt, you said to me once, you said, man, you found someone to replace you. Like, I don't know who I'm going to get to replace the things I do. I'm going to need a few people to do it. I remember you talking about that. But it turned out that Kurt and Andy developed a great relationship. And I like the way that Andy is able to relate to Kurt in the way Kurt likes to be related to. He's better at it than me, I think. And and Kurt found a friend in Andy that has a lot of common interests, and they could share a lot of stuff. And Kurt began to mentor Andy in finances. And this is from my viewpoint, from what I'm watching going on, and marketing, and sales, management of administrative things. And so it turned out that we both found a lot of what we wanted in Andy.
Bob doesn't want to read financial statements. That's for sure. He doesn't want to have to understand them. He wants somebody else to do that. It's an important part of the business. Because Andy's a good player. He has a good feel for the market and the instruments that are on the market, and what's selling and what isn't. He's in touch with music trends, more than me. So he has the aptitude to oversee those areas. Something I have in common with him I didn't know when he came is just a love of design. And, Bob may have not even known that either, because I don't express that in the company except through like overseeing advertising or something, but absolutely love design, whether it's, architecture or, I've been having cars made and I get to design them, and I'll include him, when I'm looking at colors of paint and upholstery and things like that, because he's into it. It's fun. We share that. He likes cars just the way that I do. So yeah, he has the aptitude. We have a good management team in place. What he'll need to do moving forward is really be able to, trust and work with a team. Have that leadership that you and I have developed. You don't have it right off the bat. When you start, you start in business, you can feel a little bit timid about telling people what needs to be done, or you got to learn to relax and trust people that they'll get done, or that you'll both end up at the same place at the same time if you just let them work, right? Yeah.
And that saves a lot of wear and tear on you, feeling like you've got to guide and make sure that you end up at that same place.
Yeah. So that's a new thing for him, having been someone that has worked by himself, so much, working with a big team of people. And I mean, he's doing well with it. And I don't want this podcast to go into like a critique of Andy. That's not what it's all about. But, developing the leadership skills with a group of professionals. That's what he's working on now. And that'll be really the key I think, to his long-term success. He already knows how to design guitars. He's great at that. He knows how to read the financials. He understands profit margins. But really, people have to want to work for you and be willing to work for you. That's something that's a skill and talent you develop as a leader.
And he's developing into the leader among leaders.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
He does a great job. Nice story, because Kurt started out by saying, Bob doesn't want to read financial statements, and I don't. I really don't. I would simplify my life. I do simplify my life, and I could probably have more money if I wanted to get into managing money line by line and looking at stuff, but I like it simpler than that. It's not a thing I like to do. So one day I asked Andy, well, how'd you make the transition to reading these spreadsheets and financial statements? He goes, well, it's like a musical score. I remember when I couldn't read music, and then I learned how to read music, and I spread it out. I can conduct an orchestra. I mean, I can do it, and I just look at it, and it tells a story. Well, these dots on
score this big for every instrument, as you go through the pages.
And he's like, I could tell where the tight spots are and where the crescendo is and where it's flowing really easy. And he goes, financial statements are a lot like that. They just tell the story, right? And I go, well, good for you. You found a way to do it. So I'll ask you how we're doing now when Kurt's not around. You could tell me the story without me having to look at it. And, Andy won a woodworking contest at the fair or something and he got money, hundreds of dollars for winning this thing. And he spent all the money on a new set of chisels. I mean, he's, I think I mentioned in an earlier podcast that a recent Wood and Steel, actually when we made Andy CEO, a question was, well, Bob, how would you describe Andy's style compared to yours? And I said, well, one way is that Andy spent his 10,000 hours learning how to use a chisel. And I spent my 10,000 hours learning how to eliminate a chisel, right? And then Andy came in one day and he brought photographs of his 10th birthday party. And there's not one 10-year-old in that party. It was filled with these adults that were all jazz players in San Diego. That's who he wanted on his party because they had taken him under his wing to start teaching him how to play jazz. And he's a very good jazz guitarist. And that's who he wanted at his 10-year birthday party. Yeah. It was these jazz guys from San Diego coming in and hanging out with him and playing some music. Andy can't make it through a board meeting without playing guitar, So
it's true.
It's true.
Yeah, he always grabs the guitar.
Well, that.
From the product development meetings.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
So that's Andy, and that's how it came to be. And it's one of those things that if you pay attention, if you're looking ahead and you think about what's inevitable. What's inevitable? Well, it's inevitable that I won't be the guy one day. It's inevitable. Okay. What's the next thing? Well, it's important that we have a guitar maker who has a seat at the table. And by that, I mean, he's got equal says. If you have a senior VP of HR, everyone looks at them to go, what are we going to do about HR? Well, why don't they have somebody that has a senior VP of what the guitars are? Okay, well, this is what we're going to do, or how we're going to make them, right? So anyways.
Senior VP of what the guitars are.
It doesn't fit on a nameplate very well, but the intent
Well,
is
it's
good.
kind of funny because big corporations sort of make the guitar part gosh, if we could hire a foreign company to make them, that would even be better. And then we'll become a marketing company. Luckily, we have 4 companies in the United States, including Taylor, that are making guitars in the United States. And that's good, big companies. So their factories are important to them. So anyways, that was my chance, and it worked out. And I'm glad, because I don't think I would have gotten 2 chances at that, 2 swings at bat at that.
And Kurt, as you got to know Andy, you realized you had kind of a 2-for-1 he was an apt pupil towards the disciplines that you're.
He's a smart, capable guy.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's quite interested, very dedicated. I mean, he's going to do well.
He's going to do very well.
Yeah. One day we'll both be gone, and he'll be carrying it forward.
And he'll have to do what we did. He'll have to figure out who's next.
It's a heavy load.
And I think we probably talked about this in an earlier episode, but the thing that's so different about our company is that Bob and I were equal partners coming from really different places with different interests and talents, but having the common goal, the goal we shared of building a guitar company. So that's what shaped the company. If it was just me, I wouldn't have had a company. But if I had a company and it were me, I don't know how to make things. It'd be completely different. Or if if I owned a bigger share than Bob had, and I wanted to exert my power, which I don't believe in doing in really a relationship like this, then the company would have been different. Or if Bob hadn't had me as a partner, it wouldn't have built the brand the same, probably wouldn't have had the same ambitions to get as big of a company. It would have been different. So it's really a product of both of us, and that's such a different thing from the other guitar companies. There isn't one like that, because, they end up getting, I'm sure we've talked about this, who's going to buy a company when someone dies or they decide to retire? They have to be backed by financial people, right? And they have to be in the market or understand the market. So they need to have their sales and marketing people and finance and oh yeah, we need someone to run the factory for us and make the things we decide, we can market and sell. So, and I wouldn't say that it's necessarily disrespectful attitude towards the people, but the people doing the manufacturing and design, at least in our industry, don't really have a seat at the table like in some other industries. Probably different in cars, right? Yeah. Probably different with cars. But, part of it is that there isn't a lot of evolution and development of guitars. You make the same thing forever, the legacy instruments, so maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, imagine if you were in the violin business and you couldn't even change the shape or form of it.
Yeah.
Or even put a name on it.
Yep.
Or, or a buyer not even be able to tell by looking, of stuff on the wall. At least you can have a, trade dress on a guitar. So where cars are, a guitar to a car is almost like a violin to a guitar, there's just not the same opportunity. And also, they're not as ubiquitous. You don't make as many. Every single person that grows up and becomes an adult ends up buying a car,
right?
Yeah.
Well, let's fast forward to 2014, the 40th anniversary and the 800 series. Mm-hmm. That was Andy, the redesign, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was his first thing where he really redid everything, did bracing, inlays, dress on it, binding, this type of stuff.
Yeah.
I seem to remember that binding. That guitar was bound in maple. That was made white. I always wanted a guitar with cream binding on it, like some of the old Gibsons. And that binding was hard to find at the right length. And I remember, this is just a funny little tangent. I remembered when we were able to make that maple to where it didn't have grain, it looked like cream binding. And I said, all right, we've we've made wood look like plastic. I feel like we've done such a, I mean, what an accomplishment to do that. But really, that guitar the 800 had always been bound in white and had bright white binding. And so, but we had really transitioned more into wood bindings, and Andy and I worked together on that, and PRT helped us in making the binding, Pacific Rim Tone woods, and getting it vacuum dried so it was nice and bright. But that guitar was good. The 40th anniversary was nice to have a guitar redesigned by our new head guitar designer.
Did you commission this series? Say, okay, we need to redo this series. This one's on you. Go. Or how did that come about? Yeah.
Oh, it's like warming a kettle of water. It's just we're talking about different things, and one thing leads to another. We have new product development meetings. We have me and Andy talking all the time. We have Kurt and Andy talking all the time. So I don't really know how it came to that, but probably it's like, well, 40th anniversary, 800 series is our flagship guitar. It's the series that built our company. The 814 CE is the model that really people figured out that we were Taylor guitars then. We weren't making somebody else's guitar. Everything was ours at that point, with exception of the X-Brace, which we, took from, Martin. That was Martin's invention, and everybody makes guitars.
Yeah, Andy had a lot of free reign in that, as I recall.
He had a lot of free reign.
Designing the 800 series, and that was Bob's baby. So that was really a show of a lot of trust and belief in Andy, to hand that over to Andy.
Yeah, the 800 series particularly. If it had been the 300 series or the 100 series, this was the flagship.
Yep, exactly.
Well, we also redesigned the label. I don't know if we did it for that guitar or for all guitars before that, but then the label got redesigned, and my signature faded into a watermark in the background of the label, and Andy's signature is the signature on our labels now. And so I think we may have taken advantage of 40th anniversary to do that. And so during the first 5 years of Andy's, tenure here, I basically said, I live my life to help Andy soar. I really had to give the market, even our own company, but the market especially, dealers, artists, everybody, the confidence that, Andy's the one that you need to talk to.
Yeah, he's the one that got interviewed. We really, pushed him up.
We elevated him up. And, of course, then people didn't get quite to thinking, Bob who? But they quit asking to interview me, except for now I get asked to be interviewed for hysterical things, historical and hysterical things, and also environmental things. And I still try to tell that story because it's particularly my story more than Andy's story. Yeah. He definitely has interest in it, but I wouldn't call it at this point his initiative. It's mine.
It's the work you've done.
Yeah. And so I get asked to do those interviews, but we go to NAMM, and the whole market has learned to trust Andy. Yep. They look up to him. They respect him. They want to hear his views. Yep. They've seen his work. They've heard him play. They've played his guitars. And it's a great transition. And you have to, I believe, usher in that new person yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I couldn't just disappear or be fighting for the stage.
Yep. So you faded into a watermark.
I'm a watermark.
Next, it'll be a hologram.
Just a watermark.
2014 T5Z. What made us want to do a smaller, scaled down version of the T5? What was the impetus behind that?
The other one was too big, too acoustic guitar-like, because it was based on the grand concert. It was a good place to start, but there was always sort of a feeling that if you ever wanted anybody to try and access the electric guitar tones that are possible on that guitar, it's going to have to slowly start morphing into something that looks a little bit more the shape and size of an electric guitar. So T5Z was the first, the first change and iteration, making changes about the knobs and where they're located and things like that were a little bit harder to do. You can get, especially if you're making, we had our 3 knobs up on the top, and when you start making stuff like that, you have guitars in the future that you have to repair. You have minimum order quantities of electronics, five-way switch on that. We got it working pretty good. But let me tell you, the first 50,000 T5s we made, we bought every one of those switches and we put them on a bench and rebuilt them by hand.
Oof.
So that they would be reliable.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
And the preamp, which was based off our expression system preamp, had some modifications. We got it to it was stable and it's made. And so a lot of times, and this is where you have a guitar maker at the helm that can help sometimes because, sales and marketing, can we get the knobs down here? And can we, have a switch? And pretty soon, let's start making it more and more like a Les Paul, because that's what people are. Toggle switch up here, and do we need a 5-way switch, or can we have a 5-way toggle switch? And a guitar maker will go, yes, but no, because it's not going to be the next Les Paul,
right?
And we're not going to really sell more than we sell because it's still going to be a hybrid guitar. And what that would cost us to throw away all of that stuff or try and maintain. So, I say that electric guitars are harder to make than acoustics because you have to buy or manufacture in high quantity so many of the components. You can change acoustic. Can we bend that same wood into a different shape? Yep. Can we make it a cutaway? Can you have a 3-piece back? Can you change the top wood? It's really you start with really basic raw materials to make an acoustic, but you get into electric and you have all this custom-made hardware. It's hard to change. But we could change the shape. We couldn't really change the fact that it hits the body at the 14th fret, right? And most guitars don't. They hit it more than, 16th fret and electric guitars. So we made that change to try and help people understand. And fast forward to today, and we've changed it a lot more. Now those knobs are down there, but boy, that took some doing to get it down there. It's a coordinated event to not obsolete your old guitars into disrepair. Mm-hmm. One thing that I've always had trouble with pickups on guitars, and which is one reason why when we started with the expression system, I want to be committed to these 3 little knobs and this battery box. If we stay committed to that, no matter what we change on the inside, if the form of it is still 3 knobs, we can retrofit an old guitar, because do you really want to turn even a GS Mini, which I think is not so precious, all the way up to an heirloom guitar, even though this is still an heirloom guitar, into what I call consumer electronics? Mm-hmm. By the time the electronics wear out on it and are irreplaceable,
then what?
Well, at least if the stuff can fit back into the same holes, the new version, then they're not just so obsoletable. And T5, those were a lot of considerations when we went to T5Z.
You redesigned a 600 series. You tried to make maple look like not maple.
Well, I came up with this little axiom. The most important thing about a guitar is that it's brown, right? And there was several reasons. Andy and I will always say, if we want to make a new guitar, it has to hit a lot of points that we want to do. It has to hit a musical point. It has to hit a marketable point. It has to hit a supply materials point. It has to hit some type of environmental point. It's got to hit an advancement in the way that we build guitars point. It's got to check these boxes. We're not interested in just changing. It's stressing one thing to win another thing. use the last piece of exotic Brazilian rosewood just to get a sale. Designing a guitar to take care of, to utilize some technology we're thrilled about, but it won't sell. We want to use maple because we think maple is a long-term musical instrument wood that has never really found great favor in the flat-top acoustic guitar. Every other string instrument is made out of maple, including archtop guitars and mandolins and violins and cellos and basses and everything else. They're all maple, only maple, only maple. And then you get to acoustic guitar and it's like anything but maple, which is kind of funny. So we have this long, partially filled desire. I can't say it's unfulfilled, but a partially filled desire to get maple to be popular. A lot of it is the sound, but a lot of it is also people's perception. Oh, blonde, that's maple. We don't like that. It's like that fast. And so let's make that thing brown. Okay, another reason to make it brown is that you always hear about the heartwood and the sapwood. So if we have a cocobolo guitar, rosewood guitar, koa guitar, the sapwood is the wood that's on the outside of the tree, and we get these white stripes through the guitar, maybe in the back or on the sides. People go, ooh, I love the sapwood. That's because the tree's smaller, and the heartwood that's brown koa isn't wide enough, so we've got to come out to the sapwood. We have to do that on Brazilian rosewood, on cocobolo, on different types of woods. We put the sapwood in it. What people don't realize is that maple is all sapwood. That's the only part of the tree that you use is the sapwood. You don't use the heartwood at all in maple.
What does the heartwood look like?
It's red and cracked.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In the middle, it's usually kind of cracky. You can't kind of cut through the middle of a
really?
maple board.
I didn't know that
the
about
first
maple.
edges of it are usually in pretty good shape. Drumsticks that are made out of maple, it's sapwood. It's all sapwood. That's the part of the tree you use. Luckily, if that tree is big around as this coffee table, a lot of times the sapwood's this wide. And then the heartwood's in here. It's called red heart, and you don't use it. You throw it away. As those trees become a little bit harder to find and get a little bit smaller, there's a lot of width in the sapwood, but maybe it's 7 inches wide, and it fades into an inch and a half worth of red. And you can't really use that on a maple guitar. It's supposed to be blonde. That's a Maple GS Mini there, and it's all white. And if it had red streaks in it, people are like, oh, now we have a whole other thing to talk about that people just don't want to understand. Okay, why don't we make our maple guitars brown? Because people won't. When we first started showing that guitar, we played it to people, and they're like, man, this thing sounds great. And no one said, for a maple guitar. They'd look at it, what's this guitar made out of? And Andy would go, guitar wood. They're like, oh, they'd be back to playing. Then as soon as you say maple, they're like, man, this is a good dinner, Mom. What I've been eating. Snails. Oh, I hate snails. You know what I mean? But before you found out they were snails, you loved it, right? Right. So anyways, we thought if we make it brown, we could maybe introduce it to the wall of guitars and it not get overlooked because it's blonde. We could continue our quest to make maple a guitar that's worthy of being a steel string acoustic flat top. We could use the smaller trees that have some red in it that get discarded because we're staining it brown, so it's all one brown color. And the environmental aspect is it comes from U.S. forests, and Steve McMahon, our partner, is figuring out maple to grow it for the future. And so when he started doing that, and he wants Skagit Valley of Washington to be where people eventually, a century from now, come to get good maple for musical instruments. He's taken it upon himself to make that happen, and a lot of science in it, and a lot of finding the right trees, and finding out why a tree is flamey versus not flamey, and how to grow it in the right way. And he's down the path on that. And so me and Andy were thinking, well, if you're going to grow these trees that are going to come on 50, 60 years hence, we better make acoustic guitars made out of maple popular, or you won't have any place to sell it unless the violin people decide they want that wood instead of European maple. And so that's been part of that quest. So again, people might think that the only reason that we make a guitar is because we love that guitar and we want you to play music on it. That's one of the boxes. but our guitars serve a lot of masters.
A couple questions for you. How many natural J200s do you think sell in relation to all the other finishes? Is it one of the most popular or not?
Ooh, boy, that's a good question, Kurt.
Because that's a popular maple guitar, acoustic guitar.
Yeah, with a natural top. That's the one that I see in my mind as being the most popular, and then probably a tobacco sunburst where the back and sides are bursted. Those two.
All right.
But we're actually building guitars with using maple with some really vibrant colors and seeing some. I mean, everything comes around again, right? You guys did
and
this
even
in the early days.
Blonde ones do, But we felt it was kind of time for just like a little bit of shake it up. Like quit making the blonde ones, quit making the colors, and make a brown maple guitar. Andy redesigned the bracing. That's when he started putting like angled bracing on the backs that didn't touch the kerfing, doing all this stuff to bring the tone out in that guitar. He goes, this guitar is going to sound better. And people loved the tone of that guitar before they knew it was maple. So it was kind of like trick the kids. And, it's like, yeah, those are Brussels sprouts. You didn't know it.
Masked by the bacon.
I roasted them. I put some balsamic on it. And you didn't even know that. You just thought they were good.
Little brown sugar.
Yeah.
Little brown sugar. Yeah.
So, well, you can always get sell in with something new. But then the question is, how is it going to sell through and get restocked?
Yep.
So how did those do? I don't recall.
Well, 2014 was before my time here.
Okay.
But I would say that there's a minority of players that really burn brightly for maple. They really get it. The maple brings a fundamental to the note that just finds its place in a mix like nothing else. And for players who get that, there's no substitute for it. But it's finding those players. It's a narrower band of players. Yeah.
Well, we were smaller. We sold tons of maple guitars.
We did.
Yeah.
We did sell a lot of maple guitars. It was a mainstay.
In the 90s and in the early 2000s.
We had a lot more personal contact with dealers, and we have personal contact, but it was more from the shop than, a sales staff and that type of thing that may have made a difference. It could have been that our early dealers were more entrepreneurial in the way that they sold. They took on this line, which was scary to begin with, but they liked it, and our guitars were, who knows what the difference is. But we did make a lot of maple guitars, but we didn't make a lot of guitars.
Well, we were so much smaller. So it was it was a successful series, the 600 series. But like, how many guitars were we making in the year 2000 or 1998?
1998, so like 84. It'd be like 50 a day, 75.
So maybe they've held or even doing better in terms of just numbers, but we tend to look at a percentage of everything we make.
Actually, if we made just rosewood guitars right now, our sales would plummet. They just wouldn't go down. I mean, they wouldn't go up. They would go down. It takes, to make the amount of guitars that we make, it takes a lot of variety of models, shapes, sizes, woods.
Sure.
I mean, a GS Mini comes in a lot of different kinds of wood. We talk a lot about, we like a company. Kurt and I both like a company. We like a company that's the size that ours is. We like growth. It's good for people. It's good for employees, dealers. I'm sure that our dealers like us being a large company because they like getting the supply of guitars. And every guitar player that buys a Taylor, on the day they buy it, they're thankful that that guitar was there for them to buy. And so a lot of times people have a distaste for the idea in principle of becoming larger. Right, like that's your main goal. Well, it's not the main goal. The main goal is to make good guitars that can enhance people's guitar playing life. But the more people that you're trying to reach, the more variety that you need and the more ability you need to continue making those guitars once you start, right? You get somebody hungry for something. So there's so many reasons for a particular guitar to exist.
Yeah, if anything, just to make you feel comfortable in the decision you have made. You've seen it all, and you picked the one that you knew was best for you. You're not left guessing, well, is there something else out there that I could have gotten?
Yeah, exactly. And if I were making guitars all by myself in a shop, which I can imagine, because I will say this, I'm the only person, I think that I might be the only person alive who has personal experience with making one guitar at a time, a guitar in a small shop with a couple helpers, a guitar in a small shop that's selling to local people, then to a dealer, all the way up to making 1,000 guitars a day. And everywhere in between it, I know exactly what that factory, that shop, the problems of it looks like. I have personal firsthand experience with all of that. And I don't know of anybody else that does. I know of great, great, great guitar makers that have experience of making 4 guitars a day. And that's what our experience of making 1 guitar a day. I know some great guitar makers that came into a company that went from 1 guitar a day making it to himself to working for a company that makes 800 guitars a day. You know, I know that, but I don't. So sometimes when I visit a company, they go, oh, we don't want you to see our shop. We're right in the middle of, we make 18 guitars a day and we're right in the middle of some stuff and it's kind of messy. And I'm like, I know what that shop looks like. I had that shop. I lived that shop. I know what it looks like. I could go to work in your shop. You could point me, train me for 2 days on what you want. I could do the job. I can do that job anywhere along that path. So it's easy for me to say, if I were making 1 guitar by myself or making, a batch of 2 or 3 for a month, making something like that, I wouldn't offer 40 kinds of woods and 8 kinds of shapes. I would go, what's the Bob Taylor bench guitar going to be? There's going to be, maybe I'd specialize in one of my shapes, right? And I would offer some different woods, and I would probably go more exotic because the person buying that guitar is going to spend a lot of money to get my time. Mm-hmm. And I just want to make sure that people realize both of those pursuits are legitimate. They're both legitimate pursuits. I wouldn't do the same thing if I was making 1 guitar. And if I look on these communities that talk about guitar, and they actually want or think that the person that has a factory to do the same thing that a bespoke guitar maker could do. Oh, that guy, has a great piece of wood on his neck. And the only reason they can is because they make 1,000 a day. Well, yeah, that's exactly right. But out of our 1,000, we get more than 1 that's really good that we can use on our presentation or our 900 series or that kind of thing. So we have the same quality of woods as you go up there. It's just that it's supported by a lot down below. So it's just a different game when you're making a lot of guitars, and it's a legitimate game to play. I mean, it's a great pursuit. And I'll tell you, people in developing countries who can afford to buy a Taylor guitar are appreciative of it because we make those models that they can buy, or a brand new player who doesn't have much money, or the 17-year-old kid on The Voice who's playing a 114 CE, right? Or even a big baby, and they sound good. Mm-hmm. It's pretty wonderful.
It is. Last question I have for you. You mentioned 900 series a moment ago. We started putting a beveled armrest on our 900s. That takes some doing to learn how to do that. I've watched it done, and I get nervous just looking at that rasp ready to touch that wood for the first time, and I think, man, that's an amazing skill our team has.
We wouldn't have you do that in your onboarding.
Yeah. You'd be surprised what we do in onboarding. It's cool, but no, I just that seems like a whole new discipline. The redesigned 900s and putting a beveled armrest, and that's taking the art of what we do and saying, well, let's just move it forward a bit.
Where did that come from? Was that Grit Laskin the first time?
Yeah, the first ones I ever saw were Grit Laskin. There's a few people out there vying for the invention of it, but the first ones I saw was Grit, and I even gave him the credit for being the first place I saw. Grit Laskin is, for all you who might be listening, is a custom guitar builder in
Canada?
Yeah, he's in Eastern Canada, not Montreal, but Toronto. Yeah, Toronto. Sorry, couldn't think of the name. He's in Toronto. That's where Linda Manzer is as well. And they're both great, well-known guitar makers. And Grit's very famous for his inlay work, but his guitars are also good. And a lot of our customers, when they'll say, I'm jonesing for like another custom guitar. What should I do? Well, get on Grit's list or get on Linda Mazner's list. Get on their list. You'll get the guitar 5 or 6 years from now because they have a long list. But buy that guitar. You should have it. But his is a little tiny bit different than ours in that it kind of scoops back up at the end. I believe Kevin Ryan does his that way too. Kevin's a very early adopter of armrests. And then some people start doing armrests that have sound holes in them. They've gotten really, you can really throw the art and craftsmanship into that if you want. Ours, we just decided, hey, it's time to get in the game and do that because our guitars, we've always felt, are ergonomic too. Our guitars have changed and developed over the years for how comfortable they are to hold and play. And also the design, how it looks. Something different, something a little more unique. And it's not the hardest thing in the world. We had to make some tools and fixtures, but you put the lining or the kerfing comes along on the inside, it turns into a shaped piece. We put them on our Academy series guitars now, they're just not bound, which makes it easier. Mm-hmm. This piece has enough wood in there for you to carve into it, and you carve and it's feathered out, and the binding is a little bit tricky, but we make some tools to do that. If you were making guitars by yourself, you'd still need to make a tool to do it. It's just that we get to use that tool more often, right? And it's kind of like the binding's got to go 2 ways and, go around the river of armrests and come back. And and some of them we lay a veneer on top of the mahogany, and then others we cut right through, like in the Builder's Edition guitars that don't actually have binding on them. Mm-hmm. And they're shaded. The binding is, the purflings are put into the top and the back. And that's only the Builder's Editions that have the contoured heel and the kind of scoop out on the cutaway, contoured cutaway that matches the heel. Those particularly can't really be bound in the traditional way of binding a guitar. It can't really be done. You could eliminate the scoop in the horn, and then you could bind that guitar, but with that horn scoop, you wouldn't be able to do it. So that's all done with a lot of woodworking trickery. And then when we finish the guitar with the colors and the bursts, it eventually looks like a guitar that has black binding. Some people say, well, you need the binding to protect the edges. And I go, yeah, well, what about a violin? The purfling is actually really what creates the protection from damage. And a violin and a cello and a contrabass has a top that hangs over the edge. So it's particularly bump,
prone. Yeah.
Bump prone, exactly. So anyways, those guitars have all the strength and reliability and dignity of a guitar that's bound. We just pour the work into making a form of a guitar to where you can have a shaped heel and a cutaway that's really contoured and feel good.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Mm-hmm. So there's those armrests are becoming a thing, and we redid the armrest on the 800 that's a little bit different. Rather than a bevel, it's a curve. And that's a simpler way to do it, to put it on a guitar that costs a little bit less money, and it still gives a real nice feel without having the bevel, so it's bound on the inside like a normal guitar, or it's curved on the inside like a normal guitar. But all these different forms of guitar are beautiful in our eyes.
Mm-hmm. Indeed they are.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
that's a lot of guitar making for one episode.
And someone's going to enjoy it. I did.
Yeah.
That's all I have for us today, guys. As always, man, thanks for being so gracious with your memories and your time here.
Thanks, Dave.
Such a privilege. Yeah.
Yeah.